Welcome to Unswaddled, the Nurture by Naps podcast, hosted by real moms and real nurses, offering up honest and uncensored pregnancy and parenting advice. And now your hosts, the co-founders of Naps and Nurture by Naps, board-certified lactation consultants, and mothers to a small girl gang, Emily Silver, a family nurse practitioner, and Jamie O'Day, a registered nurse.
Hey guys, it's Emily and Jamie.
Hello, hello.
So we've got two former labor and delivery nurses here today, and we decided we want to talk about why preparing just for labor and delivery only is a big fat mistake.
Yeah, I mean, if this is your first time sort of like hearing us talk about this, then it won't be old for you. I feel like I talk about this all the time.
I talk about.
And honestly, it's come up again recently because I did, it was like 2 weeks ago, I did a few lactation visits, and two of the dads at the lactation visits brought up to me how like they prepared so much for labor and delivery, right? And the newborn phase and breastfeeding. And it was like, there was like all of the, changing diapers and bathing and the things that you do need to know about, right? But they spent all this time on that, and they were just like really struggling in the sleep department, right? Like each of the parents getting enough sleep at night and like feeling really overwhelmed and running into roadblocks that they hadn't expected.
Comes up time and time again.
And it's just this whole sort of idea that the parenting just starts.
You know who actually
at labor and delivery
has been really good about saying that they actually felt like they got a heads up are people who came to pre-baby boot camp.
Yeah.
Those parents are like, I knew what was going down on labor and delivery, but I had a sense of like how to communicate, how to make a plan for sleep.
Right.
The struggles around like feeding the baby and feeding ourselves and the visitors and helpers. Like I actually like, thanks for that heads up.
Right. And here's the thing that we're saying, right? About preparing for labor and birth. We're not saying don't prepare for labor and delivery. Don't prepare for the newborn phase. Don't prepare for breastfeeding or bottle feeding or however you're going to feed your baby, right? Prepare for all of those things.
Don't just prepare for that.
Correct.
Right?
I am just asking you to please give equal, if not more time to preparing for parenting, to preparing for the changes in the dynamic that you're going to have with your partner, to prepare for how you are going to manage getting less sleep than you probably have gotten ever in your entire life.
Right.
How you're going to manage those feelings of being overwhelmed, maybe even sometimes a little bit anxious, maybe even a little bit depressed, right? Like, what is the plan that you're going to have in place? And Emily and I are by no means suggesting that you can plan for all things parenting. You can't do that. I'm not saying figure out now what kind of school your kid is going to go to, or figure out now how you're going to handle, when your teenager drinks for the first time. Like, I am not saying that, right? I am saying though, that there are sort of like fundamental things that you can think about as it relates to taking care of yourself.
Right. Coming from two, I know I said we're labor and delivery nurses, but also moms who didn't do this ourselves.
No.
Like both of us are guilty of this, that when we both had our first kids, we didn't prepare for anything. Because we were like, we don't need to. Like, we work on labor and delivery. Okay, blah, blah, blah. I know what to expect for labor. I know what my options are.
I mean, we had already started this company and we're helping families with their own transition.
I didn't even put my husband through any classes.
Me neither.
He learned
CPR.
CPR.
I did CPR.
I did do CPR. We did do CPR. But like diapering, swaddling, soothing, even the basics of feeding and taking care of a baby, I was like, I'll figure it out when the baby gets. I'll show him when the baby gets here.
Yeah.
So like we prepared for nothing and had a rude awakening.
I mean, we prepared for nothing. And I would argue that we probably knew we had better insider information than the average bear. And Emily and I still both really struggled. Even me, I went through it first before Emily. And I gave you some insider tips.
Watched you and still fell into this.
Right.
Thing.
So there's definitely a piece of it that's always going to happen no matter what. Right. So the point isn't that you're preparing for every little thing that parenting can throw at you.
Right.
And the point isn't that if you do think about or prepare for these things, that it's not going to be hard. It is hard, right? It's going to be hard for everybody in different ways. But the point is that parenting, we prepare for labor and birth and the newborn phase and how we're going to feed our baby. And that's actually just the beginning of parenting, right? We joke all the time, although it's not really a joke, that labor and birth and the newborn phase really actually is just a blip on the radar in the big parenting picture.
If you map it out, it is.
But you guys, every parenting stage is just a blip on the radar, right? Which is why these like foundational pieces to thriving as a parent are so important. And there are a few foundational pieces that you and I now teach in our prenatal classes. People don't come to our prenatal classes for that piece. They come for the labor and birth piece, but we throw in these
sprinkle it in.
We throw in these other foundational pieces. And those pieces have to do with maintaining the relationship with yourself, how you're going to take care of yourself.
Self-care. And your partner. Self-care for them too.
Right. Yep. For both. And maintaining the relationship with your partner, like what that communication, effective communication.
Sleep. No matter where you are on the journey, like sleep is always going to be important.
Yeah. And setting boundaries.
Then you'll be nicer and communicate better.
Setting boundaries with yourself, setting boundaries with your kids, especially as they get older, with your partner, with friends and family, with coworkers. Like setting boundaries is a great foundational skill. Yeah. So when we're talking about preparing for this parenting journey beyond just labor and birth, those are the things that we are talking about. And so I think that instead of, I don't want to just say this and it feel like overwhelming that you now have to prepare for all these other things. Right. Instead, I want to give you like a few on these specific sort of topics that we just gave you. I want to give you a few like,
I'm thinking we got some people with their pens out, paper, ready to go. They're like, I hear you. I'm with you.
So what the fuck do I do?
What to do?
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the best places to start, and we teach this in our prenatal classes, is coming up with a plan for sleep with you and your partner. And that can look like splitting the night so that each partner gets, maybe call it 4 or 5, 6 hour stretch of uninterrupted sleep. And the other person can be taking over all feeds.
Think about it now. Who's the night owl? Who's the morning person?
Yep.
Right? Like I worked nights. So I was down to like be up till 1 a.m. doing stuff.
Easy.
And my husband's a morning person.
Right.
He's a little too chipper in the morning for me, but like he's a morning person. He can get up. So it made sense that we tackle the nights in that manner. Mm-hmm. Right. So like you can start thinking about that now. Right. Yeah. One partner usually thrives better on less sleep than the other too. Yeah. We all require different amounts of sleep.
Yeah. So get clear on what that looks like. I think that can be really helpful. It may also be that maybe you're not splitting the nights up every night, but you realize that once a week or twice a week or whatever the cadence is for you that makes you feel better, that you just need a break. And maybe that's actually when your partner comes in, or a family member or a friend or outside hired help, right? Like there's a lot of different ways that you can.
It could be a Saturday morning. Like maybe you do the nights and then at like 5 or 6 in the morning, somebody swoops into your room and takes the baby out and you just stay in bed till 10 a.m.
Right.
Like,
so think about, like definitely this is a conversation that I want you having with your partner now around how you both can get better sleep, because if you guys have a plan in place now for sleep, don't fall victim to the thought that like, this isn't going to be you, right? Everybody's tired when you have a newborn at home. So come up with the plan now.
Everybody's working and everybody's tired.
So that's another episode. That's a conversation for another day. Right.
Never run out of episodes.
Never. So come up with a plan now. Talk to your partner about it now. Right. Think about what your plan is going to look like for sleep. And obviously know that could change. You can change how often you need help, more or less, but definitely think about that now. Another thing that I think is really helpful for people to think about now is coming up with a plan for self-care. Self-care is like such a trigger phrase.
I know. It's such a loaded word. What makes you tick, right? Like what makes you feel good? What do you like doing?
Yeah.
Right? Maybe it's reading. Maybe it's working out. Maybe it's
Going for a walk with a friend.
Podcast, walking with a friend. Like, what do you enjoy doing? What do you do now that makes you feel like alive and happy and refreshes you?
And one of the things that Emily and I talk about often too, related to this idea of like self-care, is that infuriates us is I don't know where the line got blurry between basic human needs and self-care for moms. But when we're talking about self-care, when we're talking about, coming up with a plan to do the things that you love, that helps you feel sane and helps you, tick, like Emily's saying, that does not include, to be clear, that does not include sleep, taking a shower, eating, going to the bathroom, pumping. Yeah, those are basic human needs, you guys, right? So what Emily is saying is actually the things that you enjoy doing, right? Is it going for a walk? Is it meeting up with a friend? Is it listening to a podcast? Is it reading a book? And what you may need to adjust is the time that you're allotting for that.
Right. Like maybe your husband can't ride the Peloton for an hour like he would do every day right now. But can we carve out 20 minutes?
Right.
Half an hour?
Right.
Yes, we can.
Right. So if you like listening to a podcast, which no pun intended, maybe you're listening to this in your 10 minutes of self-care. That's why our episodes are so short. But really, maybe it is like you're listening to one, 15 or 20 minute podcast episode. Maybe you're reading 10 pages in a book.
Right.
Maybe you're listening to, one song that you really enjoy. Maybe you're just going for a walk around the block, right?
It doesn't have to be at this hour.
Right. And it's going to look different than before you had a baby, right? And that's okay. That's okay. You're not doing anything wrong. You'll eventually get back to what you were doing before. But while you're adjusting to this parenting journey, those pockets of time might look different than before, and that's okay.
And I know it sounds like silly to probably think about this and write down what you like to do, but I'm going to tell you right now, when you have a baby, there are so many moments and opportunities where your partner or someone will say to you, I've got this, like, go do something. And you literally stand there and you're like,
I don't know what to do.
You don't know what to do.
Yeah.
And because you actually can't think of one thing to do, you're like, I'm fine. Yeah. I won't do anything. Because you can't think of a thing.
Yeah.
I know it sounds so silly. You can't even think like, I'll go for a walk. I'll go take a bath. I'll go sit in my room and do nothing.
Right.
Like,
I mean,
you can't even think of a thing.
No. And I feel like the deeper you get into parenting, like you and I, now my youngest is 2, your youngest is 3.5. Like the deeper you get into parenting and the longer you go without carving out these pockets of time for yourself, like the more you, without this sounding like, like your doom, like the more you forget what it is that actually made you tick before kids. Right.
Yeah.
So if you don't hold on to those things that you really enjoy, you will lose them, not in a way where you can't ever get them back. Right. But it does become harder to access them when you do have these pockets of time. So I want you to plan for that. So I want you to come up with a plan for sleep. Talk to your partner about it now. Maybe you're pregnant. Maybe you recently delivered. Maybe you're like us and are, have an older kid and you never actually did it and you want to start doing it now. Start doing it now. Right. Yeah. But definitely, think of a plan for sleep, think of a plan for how you can still maintain that relationship with yourself, how you identify yourself as a person prior to having kids, right? Because there's this huge identity shift that happens, after becoming a parent. And then I think the other, I don't want to leave, I don't want you guys to have too many things that you're thinking about, right? But I think the other thing that can be really helpful to think about is boundaries and setting boundaries, because that it is something that takes time and practice. And when Emily and I talk about setting boundaries, this is a great skill to start earlier on in parenting, especially because as your kids get older and they're toddlers and preschoolers,
it's hard to do it first too.
Yeah. They're going to be pushing, right? They're going to be pushing boundaries and you want to be good at setting them. Right. Again, never too late to start, but it's a great skill to even practice now, during pregnancy or right after delivery, but setting boundaries and setting boundaries can mean setting boundaries with yourself, right? Where when you have the 10 minutes to yourself and you think that you should be, doing the dishes or preparing a meal, but really what you want to do is listen to a podcast, right? Like you can start setting that boundary with yourself of, when I have the 10 minutes, I'm going to do something that I want to do for myself.
You know what
I'm not going to do the thing that I think I should do.
Is like women will say that they're going to go for a walk by themselves. And then on the way out the door, the partner is the baby. And they're like, well, I don't like feel bad. I'm just walking. I'm walking anyway. I'll just take the baby with me. Mm-hmm. That happens all the time. Yeah. Like you're walking to get a coffee, but, and then you have this mom guilt. Like, oh, I feel bad. There's no reason why I have to go alone. I can just take the baby with me.
Totally.
Don't do it.
Yeah. So definitely think about setting boundaries with yourself.
Yep.
Definitely think about setting boundaries with your partner or family members. Maybe that's around like the scheduling stuff, right? Like, with the plan for sleep or something like that, like have clear boundaries around what that looks like. Have clear boundaries around, family. We talked about visitors versus helpers, right? Yep. If you haven't listened to that episode, we highly recommend you listening to that one too. But yeah, like maybe setting boundaries with some family members. Now is a great time to practice setting, especially if you're pregnant, maybe setting boundaries with work. Thinking about the boundaries that you will want to have on maternity leave. And when you start coming back from maternity leave, you can actually set yourself up now for that.
Right.
So maybe you're not replying to emails anymore at 7:00 at night. Right. Or maybe your response to the email for the client, right? Because we have clients all the time who are like, well, my clients expect me to respond to them. Okay. Well, maybe your response now isn't the answer to the question that they asked. Maybe your response is, thanks so much for your email. I got it. I will get back to you with an answer by 9 a.m. tomorrow.
Right.
Right. So it's resetting the expectation with work or clients at work or wherever it looks like, where you can still perform at the level that you're performing, but you're just changing the boundaries so that more things are happening during your workday. Right. So think about where you actually might be able to start getting a little bit more time back, or where you think that you're going to want more like family focused time. Again, I use the example of the evenings, where right now, maybe you are working the evenings because, you haven't had the baby yet.
Right.
That might not be possible, right? In, 3, 4, 6 months time. So can you start setting those boundaries now?
Maybe you shift it now too.
Yeah,
maybe
right.
You make the shift.
Right.
So you can practice it.
And a lot of times it is a little bit of a gradual process. Like you can't, it's not often the scenario where you set the boundary and, it goes into effect immediately. It can, but that's when you're talking about like a shift in dynamic, especially with work or maybe even your partner. That's something that's going to be a little bit of a process, and that's okay. So that's what I want you to think about now. I think those are probably the 3 things that we talk about in our prenatal classes. But also that I think can be helpful as like these sort of like key concepts,
right,
for preparing for parenting and not just the labor and birth piece. Right. So we're talking about the plan for sleep. We're talking about carving out time for yourself to maintain that relationship with yourself. And we're talking about boundaries.
I mean, I'm circulating like so many other things now that are coming to mind, but I don't want to overwhelm.
Yeah. I think we should just start there.
Yeah. We'll start there.
We'll do another episode on these other things that you can be thinking about. Maybe about a little bit more specific parenting milestones would be helpful.
Or I reference pre-baby boot camp. Maybe now you're all excited to join us there.
Yes.
And they're like, oh, it's more than labor and delivery.
Oh yeah. Yeah. If you're not, if you are interested in pre-baby boot camp,
with your partner,
definitely sign up for that. We, like I said, we sort of like trick people into signing up for it because we do cover all the labor and birth and newborn and breastfeeding and pumping stuff.
We give you what you need to know.
We give you everything
all the
you need to know.
You're just going to get some bonuses along the way. You're just
going to get
some parenting bonuses.
Yeah. We're just going to touch on all these other things too. But yeah, so why don't you start with those 3 things? I think as mothers and labor and delivery nurses who have gone through it ourselves, I think that those 3 things are a great place to start to feel like you have a little bit more of a handle on the parenting stuff.
Still make your registry, still take your labor class, still learn about pain management or natural methods, like still do all that,
right.
but just don't stop. Right. Keep going.
Equal or more time spent on these other things too. Okay. So keep us posted on how that's going, or maybe we'll see you at pre-baby boot camp, but we're excited to see if you feel a little bit more prepared for the total life adjustment that is becoming a parent. But we'll see you guys again soon. Tune in next week.
See you guys soon.
And let us know if you need anything between now and then. Bye, everybody.
Bye, guys.
If you enjoyed listening to this podcast, check out our other virtual and in-person offerings. For more information, meet us over at nurturebynaps.com. and on Instagram and Facebook, where our handle is Nurture by Naps. We can't wait to see you there.